Hello, everyone. Welcome to Reiki Women Podcast. My name is Carrie Varella with the Reiki Healing Society, and joined with me today is Bronwen Logan of International House of Reiki. And our dear friend Michaela is off having some summer fun, so she'll be back joining us future episodes for sure. And today on the Reiki Women Podcast, we decided to get super cosmic and talk about Reiki and the universe. So, Bronwen, this is actually a topic that you introduced, and I know you have a lot of really cool insights and information to offer us. And so, why don't you begin? Tell us a little bit more about Reiki and the universe and what's meaningful in that connection.
Yeah, well, thank you, Carrie. Lovely to be here as always. Love that warmth you're bringing from your hometown in California. And I would just like to say that, the universe. I mean, it's just when I do my practice, I'm thinking of that integration, always about that integration. And it's very much in the head. Yeah. So thinking about it, why it's beneficial, why we do it. And I thought that might be a really lovely thing to have a chat about today. And I want to get out of the head, when I'm doing my practice, and get into the body and be able to really experience what it is to be the universe. And we do that through the practice of Joshin Kokyoho, I guess, is probably the main practice for that, the meditation practice, but also working with the symbols and mantras. I think especially the first, not just the first one, but the first one brings you into that. So taking us into that thing where we breathe in. If you think about the symbol, breathing in to the body, bringing it down, and then expanding that out, which is what the symbol is telling us to do, which is the practice of Joshin Kokyoho. So always that like permeation of the universe with us, and us then permeating the universe, and how that feels and why we might do that. So for me, the reason why we work in this way is bringing us to another element of the system of Reiki, and that's the Reiki precepts. So it's bringing us to the idea, when we practice the system of Reiki, our intention is to be the Reiki precepts ultimately. So all these practices that I've just been talking about are there to bring us to that. So if we think about it, how is that idea that we are the universe and the universe is us, bringing us into the Reiki precepts? Yeah. How are we the Reiki precepts when that happens? And I mean, I can just think, for one, very quickly, is obviously compassion, because we are understanding compassion because we are this, we are everything, and that's all us as well. And so that beautiful blending of the world, and understanding that, yes, everything in here is sort of blended, our mind, our body, and our heart, or our speech. So that's all blended in here, creating this beautiful being that we are. But out there, it's all blended as well. And that means that we're all this, together. So if we are that, then we're, I'm you to some extent, Carrie, at some level, and so and you're me at some level. And it brings us into this idea that when I'm working on myself, that when I'm purifying myself by practicing, then I'm also allowing that, I'm also affecting my relationship with you and everything else that I'm in contact with in the world, because there is this in and out that I'm a natural part of, a flowing part of. I mean, it's all very in the head. That's what I was saying. And really the only way that we can truly experience that is in our practice. So those moments when we are practicing and we disappear, but we don't disappear. I mean, we're obviously still here, but physically, but that sense of disappearing and that total integration with everything. And it's like we're going back to some fundamental source of existence, and that's us, and it's in you and me, and it's the same thing. It's quite fascinating, and I love the idea of thinking about it and contemplating it. And yeah, I'm not sure how you feel that working with these concepts, Carrie. How do they maybe support you in your practice?
Right. Well, I think it's all just really fascinating things to think about. And like you
Yeah.
said, it can feel a little bit heady at times, but it also can feel incredibly powerful in our body too. And so I think you're right to look back at the origins of Reiki and that fundamental realization that Yusui had. And we do have knowledge of that. And that was, I am the universe is me. And him coming to that organic realization created a powerful light to move through him. And really all of us as Reiki practitioners are results of that fundamental realization. Right. And that is so profound. First of all, that, Reiki has survived even this first 100 years of its inception. I think that speaks, a lot of things, are born into existence and then they, can't keep going. But so too is the universe. So I used to date a guy who was really, really intellectual, and he loved thinking about all things related to life and purpose and why we're here. And we would talk a lot about the universe and talked about the Big Bang. And the Big Bang, fundamental scientific theory around the creation of the universe, is that it was just a spark and of energy, and it just kept going and going and going and expanding. And 14 billion years later, 14 billion years, I mean, like the time scale of that is so extraordinary. But that the universe is still expanding, the Big Bang is still happening, there's still this expansiveness. And so I sometimes get a little bit overwhelmed with, especially when I teach Reiki, is that people, we can put Reiki into a really small box in some ways. I feel like some people do that. They're like, oh, that's just Reiki, energy healing, whatever. But it's the fundamentals of Reiki are huge. And there's this bigness of Reiki, like the bigness, like of the universe, that I think the practice for me sometimes is a little hard to hold because it is so big, but yet it is this ultimate connection to oneness, as you were speaking to.
Yeah,
As that.
I love that. Yeah.
And I think we forget that. I really feel like we forget this connection to oneness, and we've talked about it in different episodes, but about, that connection to our small self and our big self. Yeah. And it's our small self that, runs around, does our day-to-day things, goes to the grocery store, drives our car, and, does all those little things that we need to do in a day to be a human. And I think a lot of people are lost in that, just that smaller sense of self. Like, this is just me getting my job, working for a promotion, managing this, managing that, but we forget that bigger picture. And to me, that's really written in our bones and in movement. And I get lost sometimes looking at my hands, because I think of them like, we can just say, oh, our hands, it's just an ordinary day-to-day thing. But the hand is one of the fundamental evolutionary reasons why we are humans. That we can do so much with our hands, and so much more than any other mammal on earth. With our hands, we can create big, beautiful skyscrapers, and we can create healing with our hands. And our hands are gifts from our ancestors and of all life that came before us, and all life relevant in the universe, is somehow written in our hands, because we are truth. Our bodies are truth. Our incarnations are truth. We are alive, living, sentient beings. And so I think that's one of the teachings of Reiki that really points us to, is that we're part, interwoven into everything and all that is. And Reiki helps remind us of that nature, our true nature, who we really are.
The word that kept coming into my mind when you were talking, which has been thrown around a lot with the system of Reiki, but the word birthright.
Mm-hmm.
It is a part of us, and it's not, as you said, it's something big. It's not something just that that you just go and practice or do. It's bigger than that, and but it's like our minds can only imagine to a certain degree, so like if I'm teaching the practice Joshin Kokyoho, and I'll say, well, and now, continue breathing in that way to infinity, right? I mean, what does that mean? People, it's hard to wrap our heads around that.
Mm-hmm.
And often, I'm going to say something embarrassing here, but often I think of the books, the Narnia books, which are actually religious, I believe, anyway. But that thing that they go to the end of they go to the end of their world, and I was always really fascinated to that. So, like the end of the world, there was an end to the world. There's an end to the world. Yeah. But I don't think there was actually an end to the world. I think there was something after that then, but it was sort of like, what was after that, and I guess that's the big mystery of life in many ways, we don't know. But that this thing that it's that life is, we tend to limit things according to our mind, is what I'm saying. Yeah. And so somehow loosening that up and freeing that up in ourselves and allowing that to just let go of that idea that we know things and that we can just experience this sense of complete and utter, I used the word permeation before, and I think that's a really good one, because it's almost like that idea of dissolving. So you're sort of blending with everything, and everything's blending with you. So there's no definition. And so we just, as we breathe, it's just the breath of the universe breathing. And that's a very natural, organic existence. And that's why I said we all are that. And if we can find that and see that, I think it really helps us to be more compassionate, possibly helps us to really understand all the precepts to some degree, that thing of for today only. Just the breath is always what brings us back to that, and because the breath is existence, and it is today, it is now, it is whatever, and it's happened before I've even mentioned it. So the breath is just this constant flowing existence. So for today only. And then we're in that permeation, there is no we can't hold on to anything. So if we're totally permeated with everything, then there's no clumping. There's no, anger spots. There's no, we're not holding on to these emotions or, ideas about things that are actually stopping us from letting go and just permeating and being with that lovely, beautiful, natural flow. So and obviously the same with, worrying and fear, that those things don't exist in that original idea, that fundamental concept of the universe and us being a part of the universe. Those things, there's no, I could say there's no space, but it's almost like there's too much space. It's just totally free. Yeah. And then that sense of compassion and gratitude are things that well up from that. So yeah, so just, being that part of the world. I have there's a quote here from a student of Mikao Usui, which Hiroshi Doi provided, and it says, "The natural law of the great universe and each human spirit as a small universe must constantly be united and exist as one." And that's what we're talking about, this total, always, they must always be as one. And that is us living the Reiki precepts.
I think it's so true, and the reason why I can like really ground into these teachings is that I've also experienced them. And I think that's also what you're speaking to, is like, we could spin around and intellectually talk about it all day, but there's those moments in our meditation or in Reiki, whether giving it to ourselves or others, and also certainly with that, the meditation Joshin Kokyoho, where we experience this expansiveness. And I don't know, in my journey, I felt like I've experienced it, and it was really profound. When I first started Reiki, of course, I actually didn't know anything of Joshin Kokyoho, wasn't really all that well versed on, these bigger concepts of Reiki as the universe. I just could feel energy, when I connected to Reiki, felt energy, felt inspiration, felt better, either immediately after a Reiki session or sometimes the next morning. Just woke up and I had like my kick in my step again and just felt centered and grounded. So, that was kind of my experience of what Reiki was. I could kind of compartmentalize it into, a certain aspect of my life. But at one point when I was, had done a Reiki training and I was doing a Reiki meditation, a self-healing meditation, I experienced Joshin Kokyoho organically. And I had this feeling of grounding through the earth. And then through that expansiveness just kept going like wide into the universe. And, there's really nothing like having that kind of experience, because, as much as we can say like, oh, my mind might have done that or what happened there, but the experience of Reiki, it can be quite like literally like you feel guided or led into something that isn't our mind, or maybe another way of describing it is super mental. But yeah, and so I had that experience, and then it was so touching to me recently, Bronwen, is I took a Reiki level 1 training from you, and I learned Joshin Kokyoho, and I had never learned it after like 10 years, 15 years being a Reiki practitioner, and I was like, that was the experience that I had so many years ago, right at the start of my Reiki training. Is this feeling of expansiveness, reaching out into the universe, and so to like kind of to come full circle back to that experience was like deeply meaningful to me. It brought tears to my eyes. I mean, it still does. And Yeah, so there's like, and it's the ego too that can really get in the way. Our ego is that part of our mind that also does want to think smaller, is compartmentalizing. Um, and I've also read a lot of Hiroshi Doi, or I read all of his book. The book is not coming to me right now, but Reiki, a modern method for Reiki healing, I believe it's called. And I loved this, like the very simple way that he would describe Reiki for me, until I've really dived a little bit further into the traditional teachings of Reiki. The like describing Reiki with such richness and fullness and like that universal sense of what it is was always really intimidating to me, because at least teaching from that perspective, I'm like, I just know I'm going to butt heads with people's ego. And I know that that's going to happen. And I guess that's part of the process, right? We have to get out of our own way. We have to remember ourselves as wholeness. And that can be very hard to do in our modern life. Anyways, so that's a little tangent, but I was curious, maybe you have an experience that you could share of how Reiki, intuitively or in another way, was a really profound experience for you.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's always that blending of the mind and the body, and like being in the mind, but knowing that it's like the mind guides you to something. So, for example, to a practice, then you have to let go of that. Yeah. So for me, I often think that, maybe what I teach or how I teach is too simple. And I know that a lot of people want really complicated, and, but I sort of, you're just saying about butting heads. I sort of refuse to do that, and, because for me, I can feel the honesty, the truth of what I'm doing for me. Yeah. Okay. So it would be wrong for me to complicate that and make it into something that it isn't. And that maybe for people that, I was just thinking, I had a woman here recently who was doing some animal Reiki, and maybe, I don't know if we were talking about this, but anyway, and she was like, oh, but that's not what the angel cards say. And I said, yeah, that's right. Because this is not angel cards. And, that was really, I think it was quite disappointing for her, because she wanted it to be angel cards, right? And, it wasn't angel cards. The simplicity of something is sometimes, that's where the practice does come in, because if it's the only way we can understand something is by doing something. Yeah. So I know we talk about you don't do Reiki as such, but you know what I'm saying. So by practicing, and in that practice, we have that's where we find that truth, that honesty. And that's where teaching, living stems from. And that's, for me, how I see it. Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot of mental stuff, and a lot of the Buddhist stuff is incredibly complex, and it's wonderful to understand it, but the only way we're really going to understand it is if it's embodied, if it's something that you feel, and then you have to teach from that feeling, because you need a truth, you need an anchor, you need something to hold on to, when you are teaching. Because if someone does say to you, yeah, well, that's not really much, that's too simple, or whatever it might be, how would you respond to that? How do you respond to that? So helping someone else to, and I mean, that's our role as a teacher, for example, is to help someone experience that. And we talk about Reiju, for example, So the initiation process is also a bit like what you were talking about, Carrie, when you spoke about, experiencing that Josh and Kokyoho experience. Yeah. So for me, I see that often the Reiju is that, it's bringing us into this space, and without expectation, it is it's a letting go space, but it is this it is a universal space. And I actually have a little quote here that was a little bit about the universe, and it says, "The universe is a limitless circle with a limitless radius. This condensed becomes the one point in the lower abdomen, which is the center of the universe." So it's bringing, and this is by an Aikido teacher, Koichi Tohei, and it's bringing it back to us, because we've spoken before about this, but this is our existence. This is everything. Everything that you experience is what you experience. Everything that I experience, I'm experiencing. So I am actually the center of my universe.
Mm-hmm.
Which sounds almost egotistical, but at the same time, I am also the universe. So it helps us to understand that the universe is not something outside of ourselves. And, we've often, you and I we'll talk about the things, of how maybe in the New Age movement, for example, people will talk about the universe as being something that's outside of them. Oh, the universe gives me this, or the universe told me that, or but if we think in those terms, then it's dualistic thinking, so it's me and that. And if I'm thinking in those terms, then I'm not the center of the universe. It's something totally separate to me. And I don't think that that's how the system of Reiki works and how we function, and what the reality of our experience is when we blend that mind, body, and breath, when we see ourselves as mind, body, breath.
Yeah, I think that that's really true. And I see it a lot within, Reiki circles, metaphysical circles, just in general in life, is there's this tendency to disconnect from spiritual guidance as something other than yourself. And I think that that can be a little problematic, because it ultimately doesn't lead us back to personal responsibility. And when we say like, oh, like the universe made me do it, or this is why I did this and this is why I did that, it actually fosters a really dangerous lack of personal responsibility.
Yeah.
And for our choices. And I've seen people kind of go down that path so far, and I've even gone down that path to some degree too, and I had to take myself back from it. And so I know it's painful, but is to not use, spiritual guidance to give you, a license to do whatever it is that you want to do. I think that, and using spiritual guidance is something outside of yourself. Like, true insight, I think, should feel embodied. It should feel like a whole body relaxation, like you could ease into that solution or that thought or that process. And yoga also really speaks to this too, is that, not every thought that moves through our head is the right thought. It's not, not everything we think is right. And so it's a little problematic, to put the idea of spiritual guidance to somebody else, to somebody other than us. But when we link it back to that the universe is me, that I am the universe, when we can step into that space, we can find and embody a different or a broader wisdom. A deeper wisdom can come bubbling up within us, and it should feel embodied. It shouldn't feel disconnected. And yeah, it's hard. It's hard to like, I think because, you know, we're living a human existence. We're very, um, we need help, you know, we need help as we move through our life. Our life is bigger than our challenges, but our
Mm.
challenges can be really deep and take us, you know, and so it is that connection to the bigger picture. It is that connection to all that is this well of insight and awareness and freedom, as you said, that comes from that. But it can be addicting
Yeah.
to want to always be in that space and to lose our own sense of trust and intuition in ourselves. And I believe at one point in my Reiki journey, I just came to this place where I was like, you know what I want to feel is I want to feel like I can trust myself again and
Mm.
trust that I have the ability to make the right choices for me and that the choices that I'm making are good. You know, and not feeling like I constantly need to evaluate all of my choices. Did I make the best choice? Did I make the worst choice? um, I had one teacher, you know, illuminate this for me. He said, you know, in any given moment, the choice that you make is always going to be the best choice, because you have to make a big choice. You know, you have to evaluate the good, the bad, and then you take it all and you make the best choice for yourself. And so, like, listening and learning to trust yourself again was, yeah, that was really important for me
Mm.
in my own spiritual path.
When we work with the third symbol and mantra, we look at the idea of right, you know, that you were saying before, and like knowing what's right, you know. So it's about you know, that that who we are, you know what is right. So what's your right, who is the true you? And that's sort of what you're talking about, I think, you know. And like and having the right thoughts. So it's interesting because the third symbol of mantra is then the one that is about non-duality.
Mm.
I know we spoke about this before, but you know,
Yeah.
it's about non-duality, and that is the right thought, which I think is a
Mm.
really interesting place to bring, you know, so to find truth in that. So looking for truth once again within the practice and finding that within ourselves. So experiencing life without judgments, without, you know, so not experiencing something as good or bad, but taking it for what it is. And really, I think that's really just about living life, living the experience, and not trying to compartmentalize, differentiate, but really simply just sitting into the experience of this world and this experience, and having the center of the universe as a center of you,
Mm. Mm.
which is a very non-dual experience.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think what I was speaking to there in some senses is like not getting run around by our anxious, worried thoughts, you
Mm,
know. And so, you know, we can have a thought pop into our head being like, oh, I could die tomorrow, or, you know, like
yeah.
something that inevitably is going to give you anxiety, you know. We can choose to take that bait, or we cannot. You know, we
Mm,
can choose to think, oh gosh, well, that's terrible. That's a terrible thought. I don't think that that's my reality. And I can come back into where I am today and what I am today. And obviously, that's a little bit of what the precepts teach us, you know.
yeah,
But if we take the bait, you know, we can get totally tailspun
yeah.
into this long series of something that's going to happen to us that actually hasn't even happened, you know. And so coming back, constantly coming back into the moment and what.
Breathing into the moment, absolutely. Yeah, 100%, you know. And it's like coming back into all of this. And it's like refinding, remembering that fundamental self,
Mm.
and breathing into that. Yeah.
Well, it feels like that would be a very good note to end on. And I do want to say, Bronwen, I admire you so much. I think you have so much to offer in the world of Reiki. Your perspective is so important, and truly so grateful for all that you've done to bring us this message of traditional Reiki, a different way of thinking about Reiki that's linked back to the origins of Reiki in Japan. So deeply honored and grateful to share this space and this time with you and learn from you every week. I learn so much from each of you. Bronwen.
Absolutely. I mean, I love doing this because I get to, listen to other people's thoughts, Carrie's thoughts of life, and what that means. And it's, we all have such unique experiences, which is sort of interesting because we all come back to that fundamental self. But listening to, what you might feel or how that works for you, I think is really valuable, making it people listening and hearing something that is truthful and personal, I think is really valuable. So I would like to thank you too for sharing that with me and everyone else. Thank you.
Of course. Well, thank you all to our wonderful listeners. I hope this podcast was very illuminating, very cosmic, that you'll be feeling this expansiveness as you sleep, as you live your daily life. And one other thing I could have said about that is that this feeling of expansiveness, it really helps when we're in a state of overwhelm or we're feeling like our cup is very full. It's such good medicine to help, release all of that excess. So until we see you next time, happy practicing Reiki. May you feel the light and the message of the universe with you in your heart always. Many blessings. Bye.
Bye.